Talk to almost any business leader today, in manufacturing, retail, logistics, construction, or food distribution, and you'll hear the same thing. Unpredictability has become the biggest threat to profitability. Costs that used to move slowly and steadily can now spike overnight. Materials, fuel, freight, labor, insurance, utilities, everything is volatile. After years of dealing with unexpected price jumps, companies have learned a hard lesson. It's not enough to manage costs. They have to protect themselves from them. And that's exactly why businesses across the US are rewriting contracts to guard against sudden cost spikes. For decades, contracts were built around stability. Prices were locked in. Delivery schedules were predictable. Cost increases were small and infrequent. But the disruptions from 2020 onward shattered that old reality. Shipping rates swung wildly. Commodity prices jumped without warning. Labor shortages drove wages higher. And global conflict and supply chain stress made everything uncertain. A single cost spike could wipe out months of margin. Companies reacted by changing the foundation of how they work with suppliers, customers, and partners. One of the biggest shifts is the rise of dynamic pricing clauses. Instead of committing to a fixed price for years, businesses are writing contracts that allow adjustments based on market conditions. Fuel surcharges, material cost indices, labor rate adjustments. These clauses create shared responsibility. If costs rise beyond a reasonable threshold, suppliers aren't forced to absorb the loss, but buyers aren't hit without warning either. Dynamic clauses create transparency and prevent the kind of financial shocks that once damaged entire supply chains. Another major change is shorter contract terms. Before, companies signed multi-year deals to lock in security. But in a high-volatility world, long-term commitments can become dangerous. A contract written today may be outdated by next year's cost landscape. So businesses are shifting to 1-year or even 6-month agreements. Shorter terms allow more frequent renegotiations, helping both sides adapt to changing costs without feeling trapped in a bad deal. Businesses are also adding escalation and de-escalation clauses. These clauses raise prices when costs spike, but also lower them when costs drop. It creates fairness on both sides. Suppliers appreciate protection from rising inputs, while buyers appreciate knowing they won't pay elevated prices forever. This balance encourages stronger long-term relationships. Companies want stability, not opportunism. Escalation and de-escalation clauses deliver exactly that. Another trend is risk-sharing agreements. Instead of one side absorbing all the cost risk, companies are dividing it strategically. For example, a manufacturer and a supplier might agree that if steel prices rise above a certain percentage, they each absorb half the increase. Or a retailer and a distributor might agree to split fuel surcharges. These cooperative models prevent financial strain from falling entirely on one party, reducing conflict and supply disruption. Some businesses are adding inventory protection clauses. After years of shortages, many companies built higher inventory levels. But holding too much product becomes expensive when demand shifts or prices fall. New contracts allow companies to return excess goods, cancel portions of orders, or adjust quantities without heavy penalties. These flexible terms reduce the financial risk of stocking too much inventory in unpredictable markets. On the supplier side, contracts are increasingly including priority allocation clauses. When demand outstrips supply, suppliers guarantee a certain percentage of production to key customers. This protects businesses from being cut off during shortages. Companies that rely on steady inputs, whether it's chemicals, packaging, or parts, now negotiate for guaranteed supply access, even if costs rise. It's not just about price anymore. It's about ensuring availability. Another area of rapid change is logistics contracts. Shipping prices became notoriously unstable in recent years, and businesses were blindsided by sudden freight increases. Now, logistics agreements often include caps on price increases, guaranteed delivery windows, or tiered fee structures based on container availability. Companies want protection not just from high freight prices, but from unpredictable freight behavior. Companies are also rewriting contracts to prevent sudden labor-related cost shocks. Some agreements now include provisions tied to minimum wage increases, union negotiations, or overtime rule changes. Employers want predictability, but labor markets shift quickly. Building labor cost protections into contracts helps companies avoid being caught off guard by regulatory changes or local wage spikes. Force majeure clauses, once rarely used, are being re-examined and expanded. Traditionally, force majeure covered natural disasters. But now, contracts increasingly include pandemics, supply chain disruptions, geopolitical events, cyber attacks, and transportation shutdowns. These expanded definitions allow companies to pause obligations or renegotiate terms when extraordinary events disrupt operations. The goal isn't to escape responsibility. It's to protect both sides during events no one can control. Some industries are adding transparency requirements as part of their cost protection strategy. Suppliers must disclose when material prices rise, provide documentation of increases, or give advance notice before adjusting pricing. This prevents sudden, unexplained cost hikes and strengthens trust. Businesses want clarity, not surprises. On the flip side, buyers are agreeing to volume commitments in exchange for pricing protections. If businesses can guarantee consistent volume, suppliers are more willing to offer stable pricing or limited increases. This trade-off creates predictability on both sides. Contracts are becoming more like partnerships than simple transactions. Technology is shaping the new contract landscape as well. With better access to real-time pricing data for commodities, shipping, and logistics, businesses can write smarter contracts tied to reliable indexes. This reduces emotional negotiation and replaces it with objective, data-driven rules for when and how prices change. But behind all these changes is a deeper strategic shift. Companies now understand that volatility is not temporary. It's the new normal. The goal of modern contracting is not to eliminate risk, because that's impossible. The goal is to distribute risk, anticipate volatility, and prevent cost spikes from breaking operations. Businesses are discovering that protecting margins requires proactive planning, not reactive scrambling. It requires contracts that evolve with market conditions. It requires collaboration instead of conflict. And it requires building resilience into the relationships that keep supply chains moving. In the end, the new approach to contracts reflects a mature, realistic view of today's economy. Companies aren't hoping things return to normal. They're preparing for a world where shocks happen regularly, and where only the most resilient businesses can thrive. By rewriting contracts today, businesses are buying stability for tomorrow. They're building smarter protections, stronger partnerships, and more predictable operations. And in an unpredictable world, that kind of planning may be the most valuable contract term of all.